Okay, good afternoon. Welcome to the TxVSN Online Learning Conference. We're glad you could join us for this session, Copyright for Online Course Developers, presented by Stephanie Towery. This session will run until 3:30 p.m. Central. I'm your host, Jean Dixie. Our facilitator is Alicia Rackers. Our captionist is Jo Claire Hall. And to view the captions, you open the Window tab at the upper left and select Show Closed Captioning, or use the hotkey Control F8. Sign language interpretation is provided by Angela of Hired Hands. Please notice the participant window to the left of your screen. Here you'll find the buttons to raise your hand, respond to polling, and use the emoticons. The chat window is where you can ask questions during the presentation, and please do, but make note that the moderators will be able to view all your chat comments. Finally, the talk button in the upper left section of your screen, you can use that if you have a microphone, and there's an opportunity to use it during the presentation. It will be blue when your microphone is live. And now I'm going to hand it over to our presenter, Stephanie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I'm going to turn on the video just so you can see me for a second. And see if you can see me. I don't know if you can or not. And I'm going to turn it off. Yeah, there. I have a stand-up desk.
I just turned it so you could see. So they could.
Okay, good, thank you. I'm going to turn it off now. Welcome, and once again, my name is Stephanie Towery, and I'm the Copyright Officer at Texas State University. I've been here for a little over a year, so I've done a lot of presentations, but I'm still learning, and I'm really happy to have this opportunity today to share the little I know about this topic. We're going to cover basics of copyright. We're going to talk about fair use, the Teach Act, and how to get permission if you should need them. So please, this can be a very tedious, kind of boring subject, and so I welcome any questions that can be specific. Former Bobcat, eat 'em up cats. I would flash my gang signs, but I'm pretty bad at it. Let's see what else. If anybody has any questions, feel free. If you want to talk, raise your hand, and then I guess you can turn your own microphone, but just to keep people from talking over each other. Or you can type it in the chat box, and I'll try to keep my eye on it. If I'm ignoring you, it's just because I'm not looking at it. So, alrighty, so let's get started. I prepared this slide way back. I give a monthly presentation to library staff here at Texas State, and this slide I prepared for my first presentation, and I use it in every presentation because this is how copyright questions will come to you. People don't always know that it involves copyright, but what they will do is ask, I need to use something that belongs to somebody else in my own work. And that something that belongs to somebody else can be almost anything. It can be a document, it can be a video, a drawing, it can be published or unpublished, pretty much anything. And they want to use it in something that they're creating. It can be some kind of text, like a paper. It could be a PowerPoint. Here I talked about Tracks class. That's our online learning management system. So just so you know, and I didn't choose the slide. So that's how I usually get copyright questions. It's not, people aren't always aware that they're dealing with copyright, and a lot of us, myself included, before I came to be a copyright officer, I was a law librarian for many years, and I'm sure that I infringed people's copyright. And I may have relied on fair use without knowing it, but I didn't I had studied copyright in law school, but I had not really paid attention to it in my library life. So you may not be aware of it, but just so you know, that's kind of how it comes to you. And you won't always get the red flag. The red flag will be internal. And you'll go, this doesn't seem right. I may need to check on it. Just a general basic overview of copyright. A lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, hey, how do I protect my copyright? How can I get a copyright? Copyright exists from the time you create something. Now it does have to be an original work of authorship, meaning that you have to create it. You have to have created it yourself. It has to have been created by a person. It can't be machine created, for example. And it has to be fixed in a tangible medium, which tangible medium is broadly construed. So it basically has to be written down, video recorded. It can't be completely ephemeral. So say, for instance, you came up with a stand-up act, and it was just completely improv, and no one recorded it, and you didn't write it down. Well, that's not copyrightable because it's not fixed. Same with a dance. Say a dance. If it's not notated some way or recorded in some fashion, it can be in a shorthand fashion, that's okay. That's still a copyright. So that's the broad view of it. Does anybody have any questions so far? No? These are some other big basic things about copyright, and a lot of times you'll already know this, but I wanted to give a general overview. The copyright exists from the creation of the work. So you may own copyright in different versions, but that copyright will go all the way back to the first time you started taking notes about it. Copyright in this country and in most countries that are signatories to what's called the Berne Convention, which is a lot of developed countries and developing countries. It lasts for the life of the author plus 70 years if it's created by a person. Before you can sue, you do have to register your copyright in the U.S. with the Copyright Office. That's a very easy process. So if you have materials that you've created for instruction, you may want to register them just to protect them, especially if they're going out on the open web. And you can do that. I think it's $40 and maybe more now. But you just go to the U.S. Copyright Office. You can do it electronically now. And what that does, when you register it, it protects you in case someone does. You can go ahead and sue, and you have what's called a prima facie. You have prima facie case of ownership. So the court will assume that you do own it if you made that registration within 5 years of creating it. The copyright is not just one right, it's a bundle of rights. This is something that gets kind of overlooked sometimes, or you just think about it as being the right to keep people from copying your work. But you also have the right to make derivatives. So you have the right to, if you have a paper, to make a PowerPoint of your paper, to make a movie of your book, things like that. You have the right to make dolls from your characters, like Disney does, things like that. You have the right to distribute it. So you can keep people from distributing your work, say, placing it widely online or making copies and handing them out. You have the right to keep people from displaying your work, especially in the case of visual arts, and from performing your work. And performing is in the case of audiovisual, playing that work, or it can be in the case of a music performance or a dramatic performance. Is it copyrighted? So one thing you have to think about when you're going to use some material in your work is it even protected by copyright? It may not be. It may be something that isn't copyrightable. I get questions about this all the time where people are like, well, I can't use that. I have to ask permission. And I'll say, well, that isn't even copyrightable. So here are some examples of things that aren't copyrightable. Words and short phrases. Lindsay Lohan tried to copyright her name. She may have a trademark in her name and her image, and she may have a logo, but you can't copyright the name itself. You also can't copyright sort of short phrases that are sayings or titles of books or the name of things in books. Books may refer to certain places that are made-up places. That little bit can't be copyrighted. You can't copyright an idea. This gets a little bit difficult to understand, but copyright it protects the expression of the idea, but not the idea itself. And one of the examples that I'm stealing from a presentation I watched in Colorado was there are the movie Jaws, I think it's Jaws 3, the shark gets electrocuted, and then that is also used in another movie, the shark gets electrocuted. That idea of a shark getting electrocuted is not a copyrightable idea, it's an idea. Now exactly the lines and the shots and how it happens in the movie, that's when you start getting into the copyrighted material. And there is kind of a problem where when does idea become expression? And it differs depending on the medium, if it's a photograph or a text or a book, things like that. So there's lots of cases about that. And just know that if you have an idea for something, someone can steal that idea. So if you're going to put your stuff out on the internet, just know that you can't protect your basic ideas, the basic things behind your expression. Somebody could take those ideas and just change it up, write something similar, and get away with it. This is a little bit different. You should be aware, and you're educators, that plagiarism covers taking somebody else's work as your own, and that includes ideas. So that's one thing that I have to be kind of clear about here is that there is some overlap between plagiarism and copyright. There's kind of plagiarism is both broader and more narrow than copyright, and vice versa. It's a little bit different. But you do have to think about plagiarism. Even if you're not violating somebody's copyright, you may be plagiarizing. Another thing that people are shocked to find are not copyrightable are methods and processes. These can be protected by patents, however, depending on what they are. But a recipe, unless it contains some kind of expression, I think the pioneer woman puts things in her recipes that descriptions and stories that makes her recipe, perhaps that content, that part of the recipe, copyrightable. But most recipes aren't. They're just a basic step-by-step how to follow a process. Similar to that is the idea of like a crochet or a knitting pattern. Someone asked me about that the other day, and I said, well, it's probably not copyrightable. A lot of things in fashion aren't copyrightable, and that's kind of an area that probably needs to have some protection but doesn't. Computer programs can be copyright protected. They can be protected by patent and copyright. They do have to be the individual steps may not be copyrightable, but the computer program as a whole and the user interface can be copyrighted. So that is a difficult area. There are a lot of cases about that. Works that are not sufficiently original, the white pages, things that are like a reproduction photograph of a work of art. If you're just taking a photo of a work of art in order to reproduce that work of art and look like the original, that's not going to be covered. You're not adding anything to it. It's not sufficiently original. Any questions? Sorry, I don't have any. I thought about using some photos and videos, but which I could do. I could use under fair use, but I'm just not very visually oriented. So I'm not used to teaching online. I'm used to teaching in front of people. So this is new to me. Is it in the public domain? This is another issue that comes up quite often. Not a whole lot, because in the U.S., really only things made, only things published before 1923 are in the public domain as a general rule. Now, it's possible that there were some extra requirements that are called copyright formalities, that if they weren't followed before 1964, then things may have fallen into the public domain. So if you have something before 1923, was published in the U.S., that's going to be in the public domain. Things in the public domain don't have to be attributed even. You can use it, you can take it apart, you can put it back together, you can do whatever you want with it. Now, things between 1920, it gets tricky with the duration, but just know that if you have something before 1964 and you're unsure about it, you can always go to the Copyright Office and actually look at the records and look it up and see if it was renewed. Because at that time you had to renew a copyright in the 28th year. So just add 28 to the original publication date and look it up in the book. It's basically an electronic book. You have to look it up in. That is why there was Pride and Prejudice and Barbie. And why there's so many Jane Austen movies, because they don't have to pay any royalties. They don't have to pay the heirs of Jane Austen. They don't have to pay publishers or whoever owns the copyright. And you'll see that. I used to do theater, and they always used things that were in the public domain, so they wouldn't have to pay royalties for the plays, which is a good idea. It's easier to budget that way. Okay, make sure I'm missing. Okay. There are some strange exceptions to this, such as things that have not yet been published, unpublished work. So if you deal with archives in any way, which you do not, but if you do, then I think the date is 1895. So anything created before 1895 is in the public domain. So that's another good thing to know, that if you have letters belonging to a famous person or something like that, you can use them if they're before that date. Let's see. I think I covered this. 1923 and 1978. I think it's 64, but I don't know. These dates kind of have me going in I go in a circle with the dates. There's a very good chart if you have any problems with duration. There's a good chart by Peter Hirtle, Hirtle, and I didn't get the link for this. But if you put in copyright duration, it's his chart, and it's an excellent chart. It has all the different variations that are possible, and I use it all the time if I have a duration question. All right. This is down here is what's called, whether published with notice, was it renewed, those were called copyright formalities. So if you have something that is published between 1923 and 1964, and it doesn't have a copyright notice on it, like it doesn't have that C in the circle, then it's probably in the public domain. So you do have to check the back. Sometimes they put it on the back or on another page or something, but you can, it's fallen into the public domain. That's the law. So let's see. Do you need permission? This is a question I always ask. Do I need permission? Sometimes it's easier to ask permission to use something than to figure out the copyright status of it, especially for things that are online, like photos or video. If you know somebody made a video of their dog and they have a YouTube channel and you just want to use that, you can just message them on YouTube and say, hey, can I use this video in my class? They say yes. It doesn't require any kind of formality. You can do it by email. If they say yes, you can even do it over the phone. If they say yes, that's all you need. We do a lot of photographs that way. If somebody has posted a photograph, we'll talk about this a little bit later, a photograph on Flickr, you can just message them on Flickr and say, can I use your photograph? You just have to identify the photograph and say how you're going to use it. And sometimes it's easier to do that than to do your Teach Act or your fair use analysis. Let's see. If it is something that does look like it was made by someone who is in commerce, like if they're a professional photographer or it's a stock photo company, you're probably not going to get permission. You're probably going to say, well, yes, you can have permission, but it'll be $500, something like that. Then it's probably better to do a fair use analysis. So you just have to kind of judge it. One thing is it depends on the circumstances every time. And I'm not just saying that because to be lawyerly, but it really depends. A lot of times people ask me a very broad question of whether they can use something some way. And I'll say, well, you know, it depends. How are you going to use it? It depends on exactly what it is you're going to use. And it depends on exactly how you're going to use it. And if you change anything up in there, you may have a change in how you deal with it, whether or not you have permission or rely on fair use or another exception. You may be dealing with something that doesn't have a copyright, such as something in the public domain, or something that isn't protected by copyright at all. I think I missed something. The public domain, anything published by the federal government is also in the public domain. And it varies by state and local government whether or not those will also be in the public domain. There's a website, I don't have the link for it, but it has tracked all of the state laws to tell you which states material is in the public domain and which states aren't. But federal government, so anything published by an agency of the federal government or any of the laws or any guidance documents, anything like that, maps, those are all going to be in the public domain and you can use them freely. There are a few weird exceptions, like you can't, there's some artwork, like badges and logos of different agencies, and those are copyright protected. It's very strange. Let's see.
Stephanie, that was great to explain public domain, but now you got a few questions in the chat.
Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you.
No, at all. It's okay.
Oh, bad. Okay, here's one question. Do you recommend that we record somewhere in the online course that permission was given, even if it was a phone conversation? Yes. Here we have what's called a ticketing system. So if somebody asks me a question, I make a ticket for it, and then all of that information, all the correspondence, if we did fair use, that all goes in the system, and then anybody can pull that up at some time. So you might want to have a spreadsheet, or if you're using some kind of, if you're using Blackboard, just put that information somewhere in Blackboard. It doesn't have to be accessible to everybody, just if somebody asks. And you should, when you attribute something, you can also say this was in the public domain, or used under fair use, or used under the Teach Act, or used with permission. So I always tell people, I mean, you don't have to do it, but I think it's good for the next person coming along. Say somebody takes over your class. I don't know if that ever happens. It happens here. So they don't have to research that again. They could go, okay, that's in the public domain, you know, here, or here we got permission. Here's the permission letter, the permission note. If you do a phone conversation, you can just take what's called a memoranda of it, which is just jot down what happened and, you know, put the date, and that should be good enough. Basically, with fair use, as long as you're making a good faith effort to do your due diligence and to comply, then you're going to be okay. You're not going to be susceptible to money damages as long as you make a good faith effort. Okay, next question. Yeah, quick reminder about the Teach Act. The Teach Act is coming up. I've got a bunch of slides on it, so we'll get to that. And do we need to write an attribution to material if it is in the public domain? You don't, but I think it's a best practice to do it. It also protects against plagiarism. In some cases, people know you didn't do it. You're not holding it out as your own. But I think it always helps to show the next person or the student that you're attributing it, and they can know where you found it. So we'll talk about photos in a little bit, but they'll be able to say, I want to look at that again. I'm going to, find out more information about it. If you it's good to put the title of what it is, who made it, and where you found it, so a link to where you found it. I think that's good attribution. You don't have to, but I try to do best practices, not just what's legally required. And also it protects against any kind of plagiarism. You're not holding it out of your own. Okay, here's another question. Often educators assume that the fair use exception applies is as a good rule of thumb to always ask for permission. You don't have to ask for permission, and you don't have to try to get a license. There are some people in my field who think that we should rely more on fair use and not ask for permission or seek licensing, simply because if we don't use our fair use, it might go away. So there's that camp. I sometimes think it can't hurt. It's time consuming. A lot of times you don't have the time to wait to hear back. So what I do sometimes is I ask permission, especially if it's a big publisher, or if it's something that I'm not completely sure about my fair use. My fair use argument is kind of iffy. I will go ahead and ask permission and use it under fair use. I'll do a fair use analysis and use it provisionally. And then if I hear back that they grant permission, well then I'm okay. Or if they say no, then I actually have a better fair use argument because they're denying me the use. Or if they say, yeah, you have to pay $2,000 to use it, a year, that's unreasonable, and that actually helps your fair use argument too. So it doesn't hurt to ask permission. Even if you get denied, it's actually favorable. The worst thing that can happen, and this happens to me a lot, is that they'll say, yes, you can use it, but you have to use it this way. And they'll put some kind of strange kind of request on it that it's just more cumbersome to comply with, but I feel like I need to try. They'll say, yes, but can you attribute it this way and this one that? So it's not anything that's unreasonable, so I try to comply. Another thing is they could just say, yes, that'll be $50. Well, $50 is probably not unreasonable in my institution, so then I will go ahead and pay that licensing fee. And I have a budget here to do that, but it adds sort of complexity to it, and it adds time. And you don't have to do it. It's just something I do. Okay. Once attributed, what backup documentation should be retained? I try to keep everything, at least electronically. And I try to keep, we have a ticketing system, so I create a ticket, and then I can stick all of my correspondence in it. I have a fair use checklist, which I'll show you in a bit. I can stick that with the ticket, and then even if I don't work here anymore, anybody else who works here can go back to that ticket. So I think it's a good idea. You could do it with a spreadsheet. Other people on campus do it with a spreadsheet that links the documents out. So you have a folder with all the documents in it for everything. You could have it for everything that you do, and then a spreadsheet. And then, this sounds like a lot of problem. No, there's nothing in the law that requires it. But if somebody asks about it and you want to show what you did, it's good to have it handy. So however you can do that, it can be a paper file or not. But it is a good idea to have your documentation somewhere. Let's see. In written form, I do everything written, yes, because it's easier, and then you don't get into that, oh, well, that's not what I meant. If they sent you an email, you have that email, that's the easiest thing. So I'm not a phone person, so I do everything by email anyway. So that's just the way I do it. But there's nothing in the law. The law says it can be verbal, that you don't have to have written evidence of it. So there, there it is. It's really up to you. And there really haven't been a lot of cases where somebody, this happens, that this was actually an argument about, excuse me, who said what. Okay. Excuse me. So, whether or not you have to ask permission. You may also be able to rely on other exceptions, such as the TxVSN, and we'll talk about that. Or at the very end, if you can't rely on anything else, you may be able to rely on fair use. And that's before you even have to seek permission. I'm just going to throw this in here because I think videos come up a lot. When can you use copyrighted videos? You can link to anything. So just know that you can link to any kind of material online. If you own the videos or you made the videos, or your library has a subscription to the streaming content, you can use those things. You can also use videos under fair use. Generally, only clips are allowed, unless you're just linking. But say you want to upload something, you can't like upload the whole movie. It's very rare to be able to upload the whole movie. What I do sometimes, if you can't get it, or you can't buy it, or it's unreasonable to buy it, a lot of times you can have, well, this may not work for you guys. What I do sometimes is have students can buy access to it for like $2. So that's probably not going to be very handy for you. One thing you can't rely on is Netflix or things like Amazon Prime, because those are governed by licenses, and they don't allow for the kind of use you're putting it to. So just know, Netflix isn't going to work, and Amazon Prime's probably not going to work either. So you really can just find it online. I tell people here, don't use pirated videos, don't link to pirated videos, because it's not a great practice. It shows students that you're relying on pirated material. Try to find it in a non-pirated form. Like if you're using a BBC movie, try to, here, yes, you can embed. There's been some discussion on it about embedding versus not embedding, but the code, it's basically just a code. It's still a link. So if you embed the video, it's really no different than linking. And that's as far as I know, that's how the law looks at it. And that links are okay because they're not copies. That's sort of the idea. There is a code of best practices for online video. Excuse me. So this CMSimpact.org, this is they have a lot of fair use. A lot of codes, best practices and fair use. So that's handy. If anybody wants a copy of this PowerPoint too, I can send it to them. Yeah, it may be available to you anyway afterwards. And images. This is another thing I get asked about a lot, is images. So the best way to find images, and I'm going to try my first, okay, here you go. Paste. Ooh, how do I paste it in there? Well, you all know Google, so that's like kind of even silly. Someone showed me how to do it, so I was doing this the hard way. There's Google. Did I miss something? Okay, Google. So I'm going to go out to Google, and I'm just going to show you the best way to get images that you can use. Okay, so Google. So say you wanted images of, I'm going to do rats because I like rats, and I used to have rats as pets. And because if anyone's fallen asleep, which these images I found will wake someone up. You just go to images, and there's lots of horrible pictures. I'm sorry. I should have done it for the links. No good. But if you go to more, no, not more, search tools, you'll see usage rights. And if you just click on that, you'll see that some are labeled for non-commercial use, which your use is not commercial, so you can use this. And to be modified, you can use this one. You could use any of these, actually. And then we have a bunch. This is what's called a rat king down here. This connection. This is craziness. Rats are crazy. So it says you can click on any of these. They should be, as far as Google knows, these images are either not copyrighted or they have been licensed under what's called a Creative Commons license. And I'll show you a little bit about that. And basically they're free for you to use as long as you're not going to be making money off of them. You're not selling. If you do intend to make instructional material that you're going to sell, you would just want to use the reuse, commercial reuse label or license. This one, it happens to be from Wikipedia. This is a little bit of a tip for you, is that Wikipedia, all of their images, all of the images on Wikimedia are have been vetted to be in the public domain or they are licensed. So that if you click on any image that's used in Wikipedia, and click on that image, it will come up with this info, and it will either say it's in the public domain or that it has been licensed and it's free to use. And you can get more information here. So it's just a little shortcut. This was by the National Park Service, which is part of the federal government, and so that's why this picture of a rat is in the public domain. Go back. Wikipedia also has, let me try that one. They have I'm going to use this link because this link is actually changed and it redirects. Oh, please, let me paste it. Let's see. Guess I won't let me paste it. Let me paste it here. It won't let me. Well, if you go to Wikipedia and you actually just search Google for free media resources and public domain images, it will give you, gosh, I wish I could paste that. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, sorry. I should have practiced this ahead of time. But if you go to Wikipedia and you look for free image resources or public domain image resources, it will give you a list of databases online that you can use that are freely licensed for use. Sometimes they're for commercial use, sometimes for non-commercial use. But it's really handy. Also, I'm going to give you information at the end about, I have a list guide, and I have a very similar list of image databases you can use. So it's just something. Flickr's the same way. I won't do Flickr in the interest of time. Yes, thank you. Awesome. And see, it says that this is not this. When I just logged on, it said that this was not the most recent. There was another one. Okay, yeah, here it is. This is really strange, but I've never had this happen before. But the one you want to go to is free media resources. Okay. Sorry, I think I'm off of here. See if I can't plug that one in. Copy. Okay, let me try it. Yeah, I can't paste it. But you guys, if you look at that and kind of make your way, you can find it. Sorry. Linking's usually okay. And the reason for this is that you're not actually you're not infringing on any of the exclusive rights of copyright. I do think that this may be brought into question in the future because there are things that you link to that sometimes, like Pinterest, for example. I get little notices all the time that say it's on Pinterest, and they say, "Oh, hey, you took down your pin because that person didn't like it." Well, a pin is just a link. So it's interesting that Pinterest is sort of being overly conscientious and taking things down, which are really just links. So it's interesting that would go to the exclusive right to distribute. Okay, I see another question. Do all the rules apply for products we sell? Yes, the only thing you have to think about is that if you're going to sell it, that's considered a commercial use. So if you're going to use something that somebody else has licensed, just make sure that it's licensed, that you use the one that is licensed for commercial use. And I will go to, I'll take y'all to Creative Commons. This is one of my links. Hopefully it'll come up. Yeah, Creative Commons. This was a guy who had a startup, and what he wanted to do was come up with a way that you could license material that you create so that other people could use it and not make it so difficult because people don't want to have to go to lawyers and things like that. So this doesn't look really good. I mean, not have it exactly right. Okay. I recommend going to Creative Commons. They have, I think, 6 licenses that they use, and the most common one is Creative Commons Attribution, and that is this little logo. You may see it sometimes. It'll say CC BY, and have this little figure, and that's that someone has licensed that to be reused for commercial purposes too. So say you're going to sell a product, you could use anything that's licensed CC BY. And you can search Creative Commons actually to find out. They actually have, this is slow, but if you go here, you can search for things that, for products, there are different databases for products that have been licensed under Creative Commons licenses. You can get video, you can get sound effects, you can get images, pretty much anything you want to use out there, there's databases for them. It's not always the best quality because someone is giving it away for free. It may not be exactly what you want, but there is stuff out there. So just know that there is stuff that's free that people are sort of generating. Okay, I'm going to go to the next one. I definitely want to get to fair use and TxVSN. Is there an exception that applies? So in face-to-face teaching, you have the Classroom Exception Act, or what's called the Face-to-Face Teaching Act, which means you can display anything, you can perform anything, you can show any movie, you can show the whole thing. That's the face-to-face teaching exception. But we don't have that for online learning, so it's a little bit more difficult to do things. My main point about the TEACH Act is that the TEACH Act really doesn't help us that much. TEACH Act is full of things you have to do, and it really doesn't give you very much. I have found that it actually gives you less than what fair use can give you, so it is very rare that we even rely on TEACH Act. Sometimes I'll kind of do we can have a TEACH Act fair use and fair use argument, and I'll try to make sure I'm following all the conditions of the TEACH Act just to bolster my argument. But for the most part, I wouldn't worry too much about the TEACH Act. Hopefully someday they'll change it and they'll get something for distance education that is better. And I'm not the only person who thinks this. That's pretty much the consensus among copyright people, copyright librarians, copyright experts. But we're going to look at it. So this is our TxVSN. We have a TxVSN checklist. So one of the biggest things for TxVSN is that you can't use things that are marketed for the classroom, for teaching. So anything commercially available, workbooks, textbooks, course packs, or anything pirated, or a copy of a copy that you happen to have or find online, you cannot use. So TxVSN isn't going to help you with those. Fair use, it's just a mark against fair use. I don't usually like to rely on fair use to make copies of textbooks. I think that they're marketed for the classroom, so you really have to, it kind of weighs against fair use, and so the other elements of fair use have to come into play. For instance, if somebody wanted to use a chapter from a textbook, one chapter may be okay, but if it was a different kind of book, more could be used. So that's the way I look at it. I do ask permission a lot of times because typically publishers will not allow you to license more than 10% of a book. So it actually goes in your favor if you would like to use more than 10% of a book, but not the whole thing, that you could rely on fair use for that. But know that if these kind of materials, you can't rely on TxVSN for those. You can't use the whole performance of non-dramatic literary or musical works, but if you think about that for a while, what's non-dramatic literary or musical works? Possibly a symphony would count, a poem would count, but there's not a whole lot else. A song would count, not a song from a musical though. So it's very strange. The limits on it are very strange. They have to jump through these hoops, as you'll see. Displays of other work. So the things you can display in face-to-face classroom, such as visual images, you can display those in the TxVSN. And reasonable and limited parts of everything else. So if you have a documentary or a movie, it's basically clips. You can use clips, which is what saves us under fair use. So you don't really get anything extra from TxVSN. These conditions must exist for TxVSN to apply. So these are all the hoops you're going to have to jump through. It has to be a distance education course that's a regular course offering. It has to be, you have to have reviewed the policies relating to copyright. You are not going to break the encryption. And you're only going to give it to students currently enrolled. You have to have a way of limiting that. You're going to host it securely. And you're going to have a way of restricting students' ability to download, which is difficult. We have that problem here. These two are really hard. I will provide the material only for the purpose of a specific lesson, and you will make the material available only for a period of time that's reasonably relevant. So, to the context of a class session. So, a lot of times, distance education has interpreted that to make those materials available only for that particular module, so that it's not up for the length of the class, which is problematic because you want to have review sessions and students want to have access. You know, if you have a comprehensive test at the end, I'll answer your question in a bit. So this is a problem. Some institutions have, and I would like to interpret this more broadly, but it really doesn't get you much. It really gets you just a fair use. So you have to include a copyright notice, and you can't make any more copies. And if you're going to digitize from analog, you can only copy the amount that falls under this, reasonable amounts, and you can't break the DRM or break the digital rights management on it. So that it can be a problem. So let's talk about fair use, because I think fair use is going to get you just as far as teach. You don't have the same administrative hoops to jump through. It's going to apply even if you're working in a commercial context. So it's not just nonprofits. Anybody can use fair use. Fair use will apply in a commercial setting as well. Okay, let me see your question. If an online course provider has a course that contains scans from pages or chapters from the textbook, is that considered copyright infringement? Not necessarily. Oh, thank you for the warning. This is the last thing we'll talk about. So, it's not necessarily infringement because it can be fair use. And I still think that just because, I mean, it might be a text, it might not fall under the Teach Act, but I think it's going to be fair use. And if something is fair use, it's by its nature not infringement. That's the beauty of fair use. So I love fair use and love to rely on it. It's an actual statute in the Copyright Act, Section 107. This is it. And some things are enumerated. So for purposes, if you're going to use something for purposes of criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, including multiple copies, scholarship, or research, that's not an infringement. And the way that you're supposed to analyze fair use is also set out in the statute. There are 4 factors, which I'm sure you've heard about. If not, here they are. There's the purpose and character of the use. So that is what you are going to do with it. And it helps if you're a nonprofit educational institution, but that isn't enough because you could still be a nonprofit and use it for marketing purposes, which is considered commercial. And also, commercial use is not I mean, it doesn't mean it can't be fair use. You know, there's been one of the biggest fair use cases was a rap song parody, which said, hey, even though you have a commercial use, then that's okay. That's just part of the analysis. The second factor is the nature of the copyrighted work. This factor is not as important as the other factors, but if it is, the more creative it is, the less likely it will be fair use. So just think of it that way. If it's more facts can't be copyrighted themselves. So if you look at it that way, it's sort of made up stuff, creative versus factual, nonfiction, that kind of thing. The amount and substantiality of the portion used, I don't think this is that important either because I think that the cases have shown that you may have to use the entire thing to get your point across. So what I tell teachers is that the amount you use has to be narrowly tailored for your pedagogical purpose. So use as much as you need to get your point across. And that might be the whole thing. And, oops, that must be late. Let's see. Mechanical license. On parodies in regards to music, don't you need to have a mechanical license to create a parody? Well, a mechanical license is sort of a separate thing that you need a mechanical, you can get a mechanical license. Anybody can get it, you just apply for it to create a recording, but they can't deny you that. So that's kind of a, you're going to get it anyway, you just apply online. It's not something that they give you permission or not to get a mechanical license. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's see if I can. And then the fourth one is the effect on the market. So you do have to look at is your use going to replace you buying it? So if you're just making copies and putting it online so that your students don't have to buy a copy, if it's the whole thing and it's available for your students to purchase, then that's going to weigh against you. you're going to have other stuff. So, you know, one thing might be, well, it isn't available in the market, you know, or it's very expensive, and we're just using it for, you know, we're using it for criticism. We're going to criticize it. So that way, strongly in favor of fair use. So it really depends on how you're going to use it. You're supposed to weigh the factors in the light of the whole, so they don't have equal weighting. Here's our checklist. And I can give you a copy of the checklist. I just give this out, and people sort of, this is the pro fair use, the anti-fair use, and we break it down. If a use is transformative, it's more likely, like by parity, it's more likely going to be considered fair use. So parity, criticism, if it is what's called appropriation art, what Banksy does, he can use Minnie Mouse. He can use that, you know, Disney copyrighted material because his apocalyptic vision in Disneyland is so transformative. So your use in a classroom or in distance learning is probably not going to be transformative if it's just a photocopy of an article. So you have to think about how crazy are you getting with it. The crazier you're getting, the more likely it is to be fair use.
And Stephanie, Joanne had a question for you real quick.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I thought I'd just open up the mic to make it quicker. If I am an online course developer and I'm using an LMS like Moodle, let's say, and I have face-to-face students and I have online students, and online students could be anywhere. And my face-to-face students have a textbook, and I don't want to buy those extra textbooks and ship them to those off-site students, so I just copy and paste images from the textbook and put it in my Moodle course. Is that acceptable?
I would, in that case, if it's just images, it's probably fair use. But you might, if the publisher, if you've adopted the textbook, sometimes it makes a difference to the publisher.
Yes,
so if it's adopted. Course,
state adopted, yes.
Usually, I would ask permission, and you usually get it. Just ask permission, hey, I want to use a few images and put them in my LMS. I usually don't ever get something like that. And I like to ask permission because we have relationships with the publishers. So I like to keep that friendly. So
what if it's not an image? Like maybe it's activities from the textbook, and I'm putting them in and I don't attribute them. Is that?
It's usually, okay. Right now we have a big, you know, education is getting so like non-textual. So like the publishers are coming out with PowerPoints and all kinds of instructional materials. If you've adopted the course, you know, that material, they'll usually let you put it in the LMS. I ask permission just because we have publishers as vendors and I want to keep, politically it's good for me to ask permission, but you don't have to. Most of the time they're going to allow it, but you can rely on fair use in that case.
But you would have to attribute it, right?
I always like to attribute things, yes. It may be obvious that you're pulling it from the textbook, but for those distance students, it may not be obvious if they don't buy a copy of the book. You know, to attribute it is actually, you know, letting them know this is where it's coming from. I think it's always good to attribute. If you can ask permission for textbook materials, I would. Don't be afraid of not getting permission, because if they say no, then your fair use argument is better. And you're probably going to rely on fair use anyway, so it doesn't hurt. And I skipped my permission slide, but let me just go back. All you have to do is send an email. And most things are also at the Copyright Clearance Center at copyright.com. They don't listen to their advice because they are always trying to broaden copyright owners' rights and to deny fair use, but you can pay licensing fees there if you need to. So, and you can always contact me. I will give you advice freely. It's not legal advice. It's just let's see, what should we call it? It's just from one colleague to another. Let's see. Did I skip anything? Did I answer all the questions? I know we're at time, so I'm sorry if I didn't get to everything. I just took a class and it was a whole semester long. There's just tons of content.
Well, you've shared quite a bit today, Stephanie. Thank you very much. And to the participants, thank you for attending the sessions. And Stephanie, for your expertise, of course. To receive your continuing professional education credits for attending this session, you just fill out the survey posted on the conference homepage, conference.txvsn.org. Your CPE certificates will be emailed to you within 2 weeks. To access the recording of this session, please visit the Conference tab on the conference homepage and click on View Recorded Sessions. Transcripts of each session will be posted there as well. The next session will be tomorrow at 9 a.m. Central, and it's called Boost Your Online Teaching Practices with Free Tools and Resources. Thank you for attending the TxVSN online conference. We hope you join us for next year's online learning conference scheduled for June 21st through the 23rd of 2017. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye.